Alrighty, so tonight on the Newell, I am working on cleaning up all the stuff up under the walls there where the plywood used to slide under there, and trying to get all the metal prepped. Here's where I cut one hole out where there was a rust hole. I'm basically just going to go through where there's holes and really bad rust and cut out the rust and weld back in new metal. I went to Lowe's, got some sheet metal, got a couple small pieces there, and then one big piece that's going to fix back here, because back here is pretty bad. There's a hole under the wall, and then it goes all the way over into that brace. And so this, I'm going to cut it probably all the way back to about right here, and then go all the way under to the other side of this wall. And that'll pretty much do it. And I haven't quite decided yet. I'm going to weld from the inside or the outside, probably a little bit of both. And haven't decided if I'm going to MIG it or TIG it. I'm probably going to MIG it because I'm still a beginner with the TIG. Well, both of them really. But I can bring that MIG out here and use gas, or I can use flux core and just get on with it. The TIG, I would basically have to lay on the floor and then take my foot, have my foot stretched out on the pedal, or use a TIG switch, a torch switch, which I haven't even practiced, so it's probably going to be a MIG. But anyway, I've got to get this all cleaned up. You can see here basically where the water got in here, and honestly I think this is where it started, on this joint, and then once it got up on top, then it came and ran back in here and did this and some of that. But the rust scale has built up underneath the plywood underneath the steel, and got between the sheet metal and the bracing underneath. So I don't know if you can tell in the video, but there's like a big hump right here, and that's because the rust scale is literally lifting this up, and you can kind of see right there. So I'm hoping that when I get over all the way back here to where it flattens back out, I'm going to cut right there, and I'm going to cut all the way down and cut all the way to that wall. And then once I get that out, hopefully I can get all of that scale out and get it back down flat before I weld in the new piece. But I'm going to have to grind all this out and get it back down to the bracing. There's an angle iron that goes under here, and then it comes up behind the wall. And that's what I'm going to weld to. I'm going to try to get in. I'm going to try to just put that piece of metal just over to the edge of this and try to tack it in there and weld it without catching my wall on fire or whatever. I got a welding blanket and some other stuff I can put in there to protect it. But anyway, that's the plan. I went around and around and around trying to decide whether to do a patch job or whether to get a big piece of metal and just cut the whole thing out and just completely redo it. But from here to here, it's about 30 inches. So, little pieces of metal are sold like this. This is 2x2. It doesn't really get much wider than that before you're just buying a whole sheet. And a whole sheet of, this is 14 gauge. I've got 16. I mean, a whole sheet of 14 gauge 4x8 sheet is probably $200 or more, if not worse than that. And it's just, I don't know. I just decided that I would patch it together as best I could and hope that it lasts a while. I think if I get all the rust out and treat it with a rust converter, I think it'll last a really long time. And then the other thing is making sure it's sealed up so that water doesn't get back in it. The reason this happened is because water from the fender wells found its way in between the floor and the metal, and that water just couldn't get out. So the most important thing is going to be keeping that water from ever getting back in here again. So that's the reason we're welding in and not trying to caulk it or do anything like that, because that'll last for a while, but eventually it's going to break down. I feel like if I weld it in replacement metal, it should buy me some time, quite a bit of time, I would say. And then, of course, the other thing too, the flooring that I'm putting back in here is Advantech. And Advantech flooring is waterproof. So even if water ever did get in here again, it won't rot the floor. It might rust out the fender wells again, but it's not going to rot the floor. So anyway, that's the plan. So we'll be working on that this weekend. And I would be absolutely thrilled if I could get the metal work done on this side this weekend. This side doesn't need any. This side's fine. I'll go in here with the MIG welder and fix a couple of these holes. Because like I said, I don't want water to get back up under here. So there's a hole there, there's a hole there. Just want to make sure it's sealed up as good as I can get it. So I'll do a little welding on this side just to seal up holes. And then back here, I think I've about decided how much I'm going to cut out. I think I'm going to cut out the floor to about right here where I drew this line and go across there. And I'm going to cut it along the chassis, which is about right here. That way I can put a board in and slide it up under the wall on this side. And then I can put a board in and slide it up under the wall on this side. And then I can come back and drop a piece in the center. And then where that seam is will be sitting on top of the actual chassis of the bus. So that should be good and strong. Give me something to fasten to. And yeah. So that's the plan. See how it goes. Well, I'm really starting to think I might have to replace this whole piece of metal. I went to right there, I would just barely, well, that hole is, have to go this far. Actually might work. Could go all the way to there. So what I'm trying to do now is get all this old linoleum that's stuck to the bottom of this wall bracket off so that I can tell if I can slide. What I'm trying to figure out is, can I weld this piece of steel on top of the old steel rather than cutting it out and having to fit it and butt weld it? Just weld it in on top and still be able to slide a piece of plywood under there. I think I can. Where's my test piece at? So it'll be tight, but it can be done. I'm more worried about back here in the back where it can't really flex. Still a lot of rust and trash under here. Yeah, see, there's a see there's a lot of metal and old rust scale and everything sticking up, but there's even a screw under there. I think we get all that cleaned out, you can weld this piece of metal right on top, and that's going to make it a lot easier to fit. The only thing I don't like about that is it leaves an overlap underneath to catch dirt and stuff like that, but if I go under there and seal it up real good with foam or something, it should be okay. So I'll keep digging out rust and thinking about it. All right, quick recap on the day. So what have I done today? Or this weekend, I will say. I cut out some more of the floor. Cut out this piece here. I cut a little bit more out here. My original thought was to try to cut it to there's a support under here, and I was figuring if I cut it there, I can go from under the wall to there, drop it in, and have it supported, and that will work. But what I found out later is that if you measure from underneath that wall all the way to the angle iron to underneath that wall under the angle iron, it's 8 feet. And if you measure from that angle iron to the middle of the chassis, which you can't really see too good right here, but there's a weld line right there on the edge of, that's where the chassis starts, and it's about this wide. From that angle iron to the middle of this chassis is 32 inches. So it's almost like when Newell built this coach, they were thinking about that. I mean, they just put full sheets of plywood all the way across because they didn't have walls and stuff in the way when they did the floor, when they built it. But the cool thing is, that means I can do 3 32-inch pieces. I can do 32 by 4 feet, 32 by 4 feet there, and then drop a piece in the middle. That'll enable me to slide it under the wall, and then drop the 32-inch piece in the middle, and that'll bring me to here. And then what I can do is slide a 32-inch piece under this closet wall here, and do the same thing under this closet wall here, and under this wall, and that'll bring me to right here, where I just cut this piece out because I wanted to kind of see what it looked like and make sure I could get it up okay. What that'll do is that'll bring me in to the bathroom, to about just beyond, well, you can see where I cut the linoleum. That's where that piece of plywood will stop right there. And what I'm going to do then is stop worrying about that point. I'm just going to, because I'm not going under the shower. There was a little bit of rot back there under the corner. Just, I mean, a tiny little bit. You can see there where I've dug the wood out. It goes in there about where that black elbow is on that pipe and stops. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to cut a little piece of Advantech and put it in there. And then I'm just going to stop right there with the floor on that side. And then on this side, I'm just going to cut wherever I can get my skill saw, as close as I can get to this wall. I'm just going to cut a line right through there, pull this up, and that'll be the piece that I replace in the bathroom. And then there'll be a seam, you know, right here, but it'll be fine. It'll get covered up. I went in here and poked down in behind that wall a little bit, and I also went in the cabinet, pulled all the drawers out and poked in there, smacked it with my Wonder Bar, did a bunch of stuff. It's not really rotting under there. The rot pretty much stops right at that wall. Again, it's kind of like the closet on the other side. It might taper off and get it, you know, in that corner a little bit, but it's not a big deal. The most important thing, well, it's debatable whether it's a big deal. So, to some people, it would be a really big deal. To me, it is. It annoys me that it's like that it didn't stop earlier. But here's the deal. I'm not pulling the whole kitchen apart over 6 inches of rotted flooring that nobody's ever going to see or step on. I'm just not going to do it. The important thing is to stop this leak. So what I did today is I pulled the window out to try to identify why it was leaking. And from what I can tell, it looks like the seals, where it sealed in from this side right here. I've got a temporary plastic thing here, but I think this seal was just gone and it was just getting in here and seeping down the wall, and it did that for years, and this is what you end up with. There's a couple of holes in the bottom of the frame of that window that look like they're factory, but I don't see how. They're basically going up into the window, like right at this depth right here, which would mean any water that didn't go out to weep holes would just land right here on top of this, and there's nothing to stop it from running down here. So I don't know if that's a factory thing or somebody drilled holes in it or what. I'm going to find out. And if it's not supposed to be like that, I'll either caulk them up or TIG weld the aluminum back together. But I'm going to rebuild that window. It's here it is right here. Show y'all what I'm talking about. Get in here in the light. So this is the inside of the window. So actually upside down, it would be like this in the coach. But anyway, if you look at from the outside, if you look in here, see those holes right there? Kind of hard to see with the lighting, but see that? There's a hole right there. Now these are weep holes. That's normal. Water's supposed to be able to get in here, hit the window, bounce off, get into this track, and go out onto the ground. But this right here, if it goes in this hole, it's not going to the ground. It's going right there on top of that piece of aluminum and then in the bus. So anyway, I got to get to the bottom of that. the window itself is actually in pretty decent shape. But it's pretty typical. It needs the window felt replaced. You can see ain't much left of it there. So I'm gonna see if I can source some of that. Oh man, what else? I'm wore out. I went and got me a Big Bertha 7-inch grinder, because up under this wall here is pretty deep in there, and there's screws sticking down from where they screwed the bottom track of the wall on, and there's screws stuck in from where they screwed the floor down originally before the wall was there. So you have all these screws sticking up under there, keeping you from being able to slide a piece of wood under there. And this stick out here on a 4.5-inch grinder is not enough to get under there. So, Big Bertha. The other thing about that 7-inch grinder is it is a beast. So when it comes to grinding this, all this metal's pretty thick. It's 16 gauge sheet metal, and you've got the chassis components. So it's gonna come in handy when I start welding and having to cut stuff out. So at the moment I've got all my rust holes covered up, but it's a mess. This side is not that bad, but this side is rough. But that's okay. I've got a big piece of replacement sheet metal here. And once I get all the old stuff cut out, I'm gonna weld a new piece in. And then I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do about underneath the outside where the wheels actually are. They put spray foam on it, which is great for insulation and sound deadening. But I feel like that stuff wears off, pops off, and that's how the rust got started, when water got between that foam and that metal. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I may try to put foam back. I may just undercoat it and let it be loud. I don't know. That's yet to be seen in a future video. But anyway, up next, I gotta finish getting this wood cut out. I've got the rod in here I got to deal with, and maybe a little bit more in that closet. And I will be hopefully done removing rot and rust damage. And then I can start finally putting new material back in, which is going to make me feel much better, because I'm really tired of dealing with stuff like this and that and rust. So anyway, the saga of the floor continues. Well, it's pouring down rain again, and I came in here to check. Well, I came in here to finish tearing out this floor first, but I noticed I have water coming in here. It looks like I fixed this by taking the window out and replacing it with a temporary duct tape / road sign or advertisement sign thingamabob. But apparently even that was trying to leak a little bit. There was a little water back here. So I jammed a screwdriver in there to give it some weep holes. But it never came over and went in. So that was definitely where that water was coming from. But starting to think that what I thought was coming up from the fender wells did not come up from the fender wells. It's coming from these windows. Because if you look right there, it's wet. And it's hard to see on camera, but the wetness goes that way a little bit. It pretty much follows that rust and corrosion that you see there. And what it's doing is it's coming down from the corner of these windows, I think, and it's running because it's really wet right there. It's even starting to run down this weld channel right here. I mean, that's a good bit of water. So there's a chance that it ran from this way back here, but it's a pretty low chance because I'm pretty sure the coach is leaning this way at the moment. It's not quite level, which would explain why water starts here and there isn't any. It's dry back that way. All the water's going this way. So I think it's leaking here. I think it is leaking right there. You can't see it, but there's a vent tube or pipe. Comes out of the bathroom plumbing, goes up, goes into that closet, turns, makes another 90, goes up in that channel right there, goes out. I'm not a fan of the way that it exits out the side of the bus right there. And I've looked at, when I've been on the ladder, I've looked at it several times and said, there's no way this doesn't leak. Well, that's because it does. It's coming in right back there behind that gas pipe. It's coming down. It's coming down kind of right in here. But if you look closely, it's wet right at where that gas line makes it turn. It's pretty wet right there. And it pretty much stops after that. So I think that's pretty much a telltale sign that it's coming in right there on that vent tube. And then it's running this way, making that puddle. And to further solidify my theory, here's the corner of this window on this side. It comes down. There's a puddle right there. Going that way. So, yeah. Also, it's a little bit wet back there, but not too bad. And that's probably because, oh, it's dark as crap in here. Ooh, the fan doesn't sound too good. That's because that window right there is probably leaking. So, if y'all haven't come to the same conclusion I have yet, all of the windows in this bus are probably leaking. And the good news is they're really easy to take out and reseal. It's not a big deal. It's just this trim ring here comes out, and the window just about, the one in the bathroom about fell out when I did that because the seals are just dried up. So, I mean, if you had some Sikaflex or whatever people are using on windows nowadays on there, that thing would not be falling out. You'd have to pry it out with a crowbar. And I don't know what I'll put back on it, but I'm not going to get real carried away with putting a new pretty floor in here until I stop seeing stuff like this. There's no point in doing a restoration if it's still leaking. So anyway, not the greatest news today. However, I'd rather know now than after I do a bunch of work to this thing. And so thank the good Lord for heavy rains lately. So anyway, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go do some research on how to rebuild these windows, and I may come back and get back working on the floor again. I can still do my metal work if it gets wet. I mean, if it dries out and I sand it all down real good and seal it up and paint it, and then it gets wet, who cares? I mean, it's already rusted. So I can still do that. So I got plenty to do. So I'm kind of on a roll here, and I haven't been taking video, but what I'm doing is I'm trying to get this old plywood out from under this wall. And the way I've done it is I took one of these oscillating saws, and I cut right up against the wall. And then what I did is I went in here and undercut it all the way back. There's a piece of angle iron under here. So basically, I just plunge cut underneath. So I plunge cut till I hit the metal on the bottom. And then I also ran it across the top to break loose any kind of silicone or glue or anything like that. And the other thing is there was a bunch of staples coming up from the bottom, because what they did is before they put this wood in, they put a aluminum backer on it, probably for heat and vapor barrier and stuff like that. Because underneath this, well, underneath exactly right here, there's insulation, but if you go further forward, it's just exposed. I don't know if it's always been like that, but it is right now. So anyway, what I'm doing is I'm popping the floor out and leaving the aluminum. I'm going to slide the new floor under there. But basically, I run this under the bottom, run this under the top, and then I'm able to get my little mini Wonder Bar, which this is one of the best things I ever bought for working on things like this, RVs, trailers, things that have tiny little trim, stuff like that. I actually bought this when I was working on a mobile home that we were restoring after it got flooded. But this thing, I've sharpened it even sharper than it was from the factory. From the factory, it was kind of dull. So I made it really sharp. And then what I can do is turn it upside down and get it in between there. And then hopefully I've got it loosen up. Oh, one thing I forgot to tell you. I also turned the multi-tool sideways so that it would fit between this gap, and I plunge cut little chunks. I plunge cut it into little sections so that it would hopefully be easier to get out. So, see if I can get one out for you. While I got the camera running, this one's gonna be tough, of course. There might be a staple. That's what it feels like. One of the staples that's going through that aluminum still in there. So what I'm gonna try to do now, got a pry bar here. It's about the right width. If I can get in here behind it, I can pry up against that angle iron in there, coming on out. And that's what you end up with, these little pieces. It's a little bit of work, but the good news is it's coming out. I didn't want my new floor to lay right here because that angle iron, I don't know how far out it goes. It actually feels like it comes out pretty far, and it probably would have been okay. But I don't know how it is over here and over there. So I'm just not going to take any chances. I'm going to try to put the floor back like it was. And that'll give good support to this wall here, which is the doghouse that covers the engine, which I guess there's not really anything holding it up right now. I hope it's screwed into that angle iron. But anyway, I'm going to keep pulling the rest of this out. And I think once I do that, that's going to be all the old flooring out. At least all the old flooring I'm going to pull out for now. All right, and there you go. You can see under it. I actually knocked this old piece of flooring back up under there just to see if I could, and to make room for my temporary floor so I don't fall through. But yeah, that stuff honestly kind of came out a little easier than I thought it was going to. It wasn't too terrible. So I'm ready to start putting the floor back in this thing, that's for sure.